Welcome to the Natural History Cupboard. Come on in.
And welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, the place where the weird and wonderful parts of the natural world come together. I'm your host, Gareth, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Aaron. Aaron, say hi. What are we up to?
Hi, and what we're up to is recording a new episode of this esteemed podcast. But if you mean what have you been up to?
Yeah, should have probably prefaced with that. Yeah,
I've not been up to much. More than normal, I would say, but not altogether too much. But I've been out looking at doing a bit of twitching.
Oh.
Yeah, a bit of bird watching. I've managed to spot kestrels,
Nice,
red kite, buzzards, raven, sparrowhawk, and damn it, I've forgotten the other one. But I've spent a good amount of time watching them. So this year, I don't have any photographs. So one thing that always evades me is a photograph of a bird.
Yeah, it's always kind of hard to.
Red kites and kingfishers have notoriously been the bane of my time on this podcast. but yeah, they're so hard to photograph for me.
I mean, they're quite hard things to get a decent photo of usually, because it's any kind of bird of prey. It's usually a small silhouette in the sky, and unless you've got wonderfully brilliant camera equipment, which neither of us possess, it's always a bit harder to get a decent picture of them. But yeah.
And then if it's a smaller one, like a kingfisher,
gone.
Yeah.
Or you sit there for an hour by a riverside until someone's dogs come careening through where you've been sat, and ruin the shot. So
if ever there was an argument for joining our Patreon, there it is, to get us some camera equipment.
True.
We should have an Amazon wish list.
Well, you never know.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good. I mean, that's more birds than I think I've seen this week.
I mean, I've seen other birds. Like I've seen herring gulls and pigeons and stuff like that. Like but like the noteworthy one. I mean, they're all noteworthy. Here we go. Now I'm gonna not be able to define what I've seen, but ones that kind of stand out.
Yeah.
They all stand. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, no. I like if you said, "Oh, I've seen a load of herring gulls this week," it's like brilliant. I mean, that means you've been somewhere. Yes. So it's well, the only bird interaction I'm going to say I've had realistically this week is we went to a Christmas market as a family in Exeter. And it was actually
that is wild.
Yeah, if you could have got rid of all the people that were there, it would have been lovely.
Yeah.
But it was actually kind of interesting to see. Now, the main attraction in my mind for a Christmas market is, well, what I was thinking is there was going to be like German food and beer and things like that. Didn't actually see too many places doing like steins of beer and everything.
Oh yeah.
I don't drink much, but I do like the idea of just a nice German beer. They're generally nicer than most of the sort of beers that you get, but yeah, there wasn't any that I could see as far as I could see.
They often don't do it in the big steins because they're glass and they won't let you have glass on the street.
Just a plastic one would have been nice. But the main sort of bird component it was all outside of Exeter Cathedral, so it was quite a nice sort of Gothic architecture and everything overlooks you, and loads of pigeons and loads of herring gulls. And it was quite interesting to watch the throng of people that are in this sort of food court area as people going and lining up and just sort of cutting in front of you, which is even more infuriating, is you'd see people drop a bit of food and you could see the instant reaction from the herring gulls who were sitting up on the roofs of buildings watching, waiting for their moment. But because pigeons are just that bit smaller, a bit more nimble at getting around people's feet, and the herring gulls are much bigger birds comparatively. They're sort of 2, sometimes 3 times the size of a pigeon.
Yeah,
they can't get in amongst people's feet, and you could see this instant of the moment a person dropped a piece of food, the pigeons were down there and they were getting to bits of it, and the first pigeon that would take off would be mobbed by herring gulls trying to get the bit of food, and they were swooping low over people's heads. And people always go, "Oh, I went to the seaside and lost my chips to a gull." you're clearly not quick enough. I've never had a bird steal food from me. If anything, I'd love to get them that close. But the sort of interaction that was really nice is we sat there having our food on a wall, and this particularly, I'm going to say cocky pigeon basically walked up and sort of like, what you got?
Yeah.
And he's just sort of standing there staring, and it was quite nice. My 4-year-old is standing there, and I was like, just stand still, he's not going to take anything from you. And I was like, just put that little bit of food on the wall there, and he'll come over. And
in the pest species,
I didn't mind him having a little bit of food. This wasn't like a whole chunk of bread roll, but this was a tiny bit of food on the side there. And he sort of came over and had that, but then sort of sat there for a couple of minutes thinking, well, he's going to feed me more, isn't he? But it was just nice. 4-year-old looking up close, pigeon looking up close. It's a nice bit of interaction. And he acted really well around that pigeon. And it's always nice because I really don't like it when you see parents that just let them. I've always been the thing of never tell people how to parent. It's one of the worst things you can do, I think, in some ways, because everyone parents differently. However, there are certain things that I think just need to be said. People who let their kids run after birds,
chase birds, yeah,
I think that's awful. I think it's one of the worst. It's teaching a real disrespect or lack of respect for wild animals. And when you see people doing that, I feel like going, I wish I had some dogs or something to get them to chase their children and go, oh, isn't it funny? A little bit of torture, I know, but still. Yeah, either way.
Sometimes the old ways work.
This is probably why I'm not in charge of, children. Oh, wait, education. Anyway, I don't do that at work, I'd like to point out. We don't have any dogs. They're usually terrified of the tarantulas more than anything. Anyway, before I incriminate myself further, shall we head into the news?
Let's do it.
It's the news!
Right, well, we're into this week's news. I'm going to start things off with some bad news.
Hey,
I mean, let's start as we mean to go on, I suppose, in a weird, horrible way. So this is from Living with Wolves, which is a Facebook group, but they've reported themselves on ColumbiaGeorgiaNews.com. Now, you may recall a couple of episodes ago, we talked about a bounty being put up for the capture of someone who had shot a Mexican grey wolf. Unfortunately, well, I still don't know anything about whether anyone's been brought in for that. However, I say unfortunately, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has discovered an adult male grey wolf that was shot and killed just outside Goldendale, Washington. So the sort of bounty they've put for any sort of assistance in trying to find out who's done this is $10,000 as a reward, which is a lot lower than the reward they were offering for the Mexican grey wolf culprit.
I think they probably know with the incoming leadership that there's no real point in this.
True. The wolf reportedly killed 2 calves on a ranch in the area, but the responsible party is still unknown as to who killed this wolf. And they're offering a reward of $10,000 to basically help with any information. And callers can remain anonymous. Grey wolves are federally protected under the Endangered Species Act, and any information is obviously going to help with or prosecuting some people who've illegally gone and killed a grey wolf.
Yeah, hopefully they find that person swiftly.
Yeah,
before changes come. So my first article comes to us from IFL Science, and the headline is 205 million year old lizard is the world's oldest, discovered in a quarry near Bristol.
Nice.
Yeah, so after much debate and argument, a tiny skeleton found in a quarry near Bristol.
Which quarry?
It didn't say. The article I read didn't say anyway. I suppose because they don't want people going to this quarry.
Not that I would consider that.
Because also in the news lately has been, I believe there was an amateur paleontological dig organised up near Norfolk. They had found mammoth fossils,
Nice.
and overnight some little
Toe rags.
yes, have gone in and stolen all the fossils. So now they can't piece together a full restoration of this mammoth, and it was thought that it
That would have gone on to
a lot of the bones
market
would
somewhere.
have been
Yeah.
present. So yeah, that's a
Lovely.
shame. But yeah, back to my actual article. And the lizard has been awarded the biggest title as the current oldest lizard known to science. Cryptovaranoides microlanius is at least 205 million years old, pushing the emergence of lizards back by 30 million years.
Is it a Bitcoin monitor lizard, is it?
Yeah.
Cryptovaranoides.
It does sound like it, doesn't it? Cryptovaranoides.
So my next one comes to us from the BBC. Wildlife Park takes precautions against bird flu. Unfortunately, this is something that is not going to go away and has never really gone away.
Nope.
But as a piece goes, it's quite interesting to see. It's a wildlife sanctuary down in Cornwall called Paradise Park. Never been there myself, but I've heard quite good things. They've got over 1,300 rare and exotic birds in this collection. So they are, unfortunately, within the bounds of a bird flu restriction zone, which has hit Cornwall. Thankfully, it hasn't hit as far as Devon yet. But they're on alert after an outbreak of bird flu was confirmed in a nearby village. The keepers basically introduced strict biosecurity measures. The article goes on to essentially say, the measures that they're taking at the park to make sure that their birds are safe. So, yeah, it's one of those things that unfortunately is never going to go away, but it's good to see. It's kind of raising awareness of the fact that it's there, and zoos and collections have to respond swiftly to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next article comes to us from BBC Future Planet, and the headline is really cool on this one, I think. How a tribe brought back its sacred condors. So after a 100-year absence, condors, sacred to the Yurok nation, soar above the Yurok lands. The bird is a linchpin in the nation's creation myth, but has been absent from their homeland of Northern California for so long that their people no longer spoke of them. DDT poisoning, lead poisoning, and poaching all led to the near catastrophic downfall of the bird. But after 16 years, Diana Williams, director of the Yurok Tribe Wildlife Department, has successfully helped usher in a new era, one where future generations of Yurok will not just be able to talk about their sacred bird, but see them in the flesh, or rather feather.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Back to the bad news for me, I'm afraid. The final one for this week. Japan's new whaling supership sets sail. This is from the AsianSentinel.com. At the odds with the rest of the world, Japan is basically, sticking firmly in the past, it would appear. As the rest of the world has turned away from whaling, Japan is clinging to a historic past in stark contrast to the 1986 moratorium on whaling. I'd like to point out 1986 is now quite a long time ago. I should know, well, both of us should know. Basically, this is, it's an agreement that basically said that we would all stop whaling, really. Some countries have just stuck to it. And this new powerful advanced whaling vessel, the most powerful one that they have ever built, costing a whopping $48 million US, is being hailed as a mothership called the Kangai Maru, designed to basically, head to Antarctica, and I'd like to point out to Australian waters and slaughter whales, which I don't get. I really don't get.
Spend all that money on a weaponized ship for science.
No,
that's
no.
That's not science.
Definitely not science.
Not science. And you know what? More and more, it shows you how wrong Sea Shepherd are. Like the current version of Sea Shepherd, because they kicked out Captain Paul Watson.
Yeah.
Right? because he was too aggressive, and he's had to form his own thing. Well, Captain Paul Watson's now going to spend his birthday behind bars.
Still,
yeah. And you just think, what are you actually doing, Sea Shepherd? Because it seems like you're doing nothing now. So maybe rethink that particular.
Yeah. Why? There's just no need. So much not a need to do this. And I'll reiterate again, if we do have any Japanese viewers, please let us know your thoughts on whale meat, whaling. Have you ever tried it, for instance? You know, is it that popular that it's there in the shops? Or is it one of these things that's a bit sort of upper middle class, sort of snobbery, sort of, look at me, I'm eating my piece of whale, you know?
I wonder if anyone that genuinely eats it, the levels of mercury in that,
well, yeah,
it's got to be pretty high, especially that part of the world. Yeah, not cool, not cool Japan, not cool Sea Shepherd, and not cool Australian government. There you go, calling all of you out. Yeah. So the next, my last article for this section is bird guides. That's the news source.
I like that source.
And the headline is plans to restore golden eagle to England and Wales. Yes, this is news that I think we're both looking forward to hearing.
Yeah.
The South of Scotland Golden Eagle project is heading the effort to re-establish the species once more in the rest of their historic British range. The rewilding goal would undo farmers and shooting estates' effort to eradicate the species through the 19th century, with Wales being slightly ahead of England now, as they are in the feasibility and consultation stage, as Scandinavian chicks are being earmarked for dragon country in the very foreseeable future. Here's hoping the NFU can once again STF you. Sorry, I'm just really done with the NFU at this point in my life.
Did you know that they came back for a very brief period during World War II into England?
Oh yeah.
And it was only into the late 1940s, nearly 1950s, when the agricultural intensification hit parts of the country to basically make sure that there was enough food to feed everyone, that a lot of these estates got rid of the remaining eagles that were there, and we never saw them south of the Scottish borders since. But it would be amazing to see golden eagles, and to be honest, do you know what, it would be amazing to see golden eagles in and around Snowdonia, considering that Eryri is literally Welsh for eagle. You know, it's the eagle's nest. It's supposed to be there. It should be their home. And that would be an awesome bird to see around there.
It would be. It really would be.
On a complete side note, but still quite cool, the other day I had one of my students tell me that her dad, who works up on Exmoor, was working out in a field, and they had a white-tailed sea eagle fly over really low.
Wow.
And it's just a really good sign that they're on the increase as well. We talked about how they're planning on increasing more of them along the Severn as well. We're getting our big aerial predators back. This is good.
It is good
stuff.
news. It is good news. We just have to keep fighting the ignorance that gets peddled out with NFU propaganda.
But such an impressive bird, a golden eagle.
So yeah, that about wraps it up for this week's instalment of the Natural History Covered's newsreel. If you guys at home have anything that you want us to cover, send it on in. You might see it in our newsreel, or you might see it in our main topic, which is with Gareth this week.
So if I was to ask you to name a pollinator, Aaron, could you name me a pollinator?
Immediately, bees, wasps, flies. Yeah.
They're all relatively non-mammalian. Can you name me a mammalian pollinator? There are quite a few.
I was going to say there are a few. Even so much as like cats, when it gets caught on their fur and then drops off later on.
Yeah. That's more seed dispersal.
Seed dispersal, yeah, I suppose it is. Go on then.
All right. Well, so things like bats, possums.
I didn't know possums were.
Yeah, there's the honey possums. They absolutely love flowers and things like that.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
But there's lots of different mammals that do that. There's lots of different other animals that are pollinators. But what if I said a wolf was a pollinator? Not something you tend to think of hovering around a flower. But from the Smithsonian Magazine, there has been a recent study that has basically shown that the Ethiopian wolf, a highly endangered species of wolf, a very pretty species of wolf as well, actually has a sweet tooth for pollen. Now, like I say, they're not living their entire lives off this, but just like any dog, they are going to find things interesting. They're going to try things out. And let's face it, most dogs will quite happily pretty much eat anything anyway. But some mixed results may, turn up for certain species. But the Ethiopian wolf has been observed going up to red hot poker plants, which you may even have in your garden. They're those sort of a green bush with a tall flower stem and then red and yellow sort of flower parts on the top that looks like a red hot poker. Well, it turns out Ethiopian wolves have developed a bit of a taste for the nectar that seems to be coming off those flowers, and in the process getting their muzzles absolutely covered in pollen, and then obviously transmitting that to another plant when they go over to another one. This technically would make them the largest carnivore pollinator in the world, and not generally something that you would tend to think of as being a traditional pollinator.
No.
And the article itself does talk about how, our usual pollinating list is quite small. But these are one of the rarest dogs in the world, and possibly the first known large carnivore to pollinate, as they like to lick the red hot poker plants to get a bit of a sweet fix, it would appear. It's become sort of like catnip to cats. It's become their sort of fun or favorite thing to go and find to have a bit of a nice sweet treat. So doing this, let's say they get the pollen stuck on their muzzles, and they've been said to be licking the flowers like licking ice cream cones. And it does look quite good. The pictures of them are just full on sort of head back licking these things to try and get as much off them. Sandra Lay, an ecologist from Oxford University, has been watching the wolves in a scene like from something from a storybook. The images that have come out are no doubt that the wolves are drinking nectar. There's no mistaking what they're doing. And this is also backed up by the University of Minnesota, who studied the wolves' diet, but wasn't involved in this current study that has gone on, but has added to the publication, just basically talking about the Ethiopian wolf diet in the wild. Interesting sort of breakdown of Ethiopian wolves. There are 500 Ethiopian wolves in the wild, and that is it. They are incredibly rare. With agriculture and disease taking a huge toll on their population, and they live high up in the Ethiopian highlands and feed on small mammals, mostly because there's not a giant amount up there. And when you think wolves, you tend to think of big timber wolves and European grey wolves and that, but these guys are quite different. They are a separate species.
Yeah, so they're kind of between the realms of, they're definitely on the wolf side of the canid tree.
But they're not Canis lupus.
They're not Canis lupus, they're Canis simensis, I think it is. And what I think, if I remember right, I did try and have a look just now, the current prevailing theory is that there was an offshoot of the grey wolf ancestor, the ancestral wolf of the grey wolves. They think that they tried to invade Africa at one point
and got bored.
Yeah, well, basically, the only ones left are what became the Ethiopian wolves. So definitely part of the wolf part of the tree. So you're talking coyotes, jackals, dholes, and the wolves. Not
the same as you,
and stuff, but not the same species, and not a subspecies either.
So the big part of this study as well was pointing out that for large carnivores, nectar feeding is really unusual. You don't tend to think of lions licking flowers, or even bears realistically doing that as well to a like proper degree. They'll eat fruit, they'll disperse seeds, all those sort of things. But generally, large carnivores are not physically adapted for it. They don't possess a long tongue to be able to get into flowers, or a small enough tongue in that sense. And most flowers are too small and too fragile to be of any use to any large carnivore. They would basically destroy them in the process. And to the best of the author's knowledge, that the only time this has been documented from a large carnivore standpoint is these wolves basically consuming nectar. So it's a bit of groundbreaking animal observations, and proof that, you know, even when we think an animal is not going to be physically adapted for something, doesn't mean it's not going to try it. So
Ethiopian wolves are incredibly interesting. We'll have to do a creature feature on them at some point. They're part of what could be it's a somewhat symbiotic relationship that it borders on domestication.
With what?
Baboons.
Oh, what the not hamadryas, the gelada baboons.
So,
yeah.
So as they forage through the grass, obviously they don't want the wolves hunting their young. So as they forage through the grass, they beat where the rodent burrows are,
and they flush the rodents
out for the wolves. And then the wolves
get a nice tasty meal.
They get a meal, but also they protect the baboons from other predators.
Things like hyenas and that. I mean, there you go. Really cool animals.
Interesting species.
Well, talking about interesting species, shall we head into our creature feature?
Let's we'll flop in.
Flop in.
It's the creature feature.
Right, well, we're into this week's creature feature. Aaron, what are we looking at?
So we've covered a number of fish, I think it's fair to say, over the years, mostly weird ones, but whilst there are arguably none that can out-weird the kangaroo, and I did try with an invert once, and that didn't work either. So
which one was that?
That was the tongue louse. That was I deliberately picked that one to try and outgross your kangaroo, but
fair enough.
But people thought the kangaroo was grosser. So there we go. But there are many perhaps that look a little odder than the kangaroo, even if in their life biology they're not anywhere near as odd. At this point, I could go into anglerfish with a setup like that, but actually this is more or less a fish that evolution thought could be an underwater aeroplane. And this fish is, you might have heard of it, the flying Gurnard, which, now I say that in the creature feature, it doesn't sound like a particularly attractive name. Gurnard. It's French, by the way.
I couldn't have guessed.
Now, this may be a bit of a shorter creature feature, in fairness, as there's not actually a whole lot of detail out there about them. But the flying Gurnards are a family of fish called the Dactylopteridae, and they are easily identifiable by the disproportionately enlarged wing-like pectoral fins. This, incidentally, is probably a good time to say that the flying Gurnard is not a particularly apt name. As aside from looking like wings, these fins don't actually grant the fish with the illusion of attempting to fly like a flying fish can.
I'm sure in their head they're shouting, "I'm flying."
In actual fact, these fish are true bottom dwellers, so they won't even be found at the surface. They tend to hang out on the seafloor, where they've been noted as walking using their pectoral fins to produce this form of locomotion. Essentially, there are 4 parts to the pectoral fins. The section nearest the head presents 3 rays that act very much like fingers. And it's these that do that walking, so to speak, as they're going along the floor like that.
It's like somebody sort of duct taped it onto a crab, basically.
Yeah. So most authors and academics have actually moved away from the flying moniker and have come to prefer the name, as I do, I think, of helmeted Gurnard in order to distance these fish from that ability. But aside from these impressive wings, I would say that flying gurnards almost loosely resemble a goby-like fish that you might find in your local rock pools if you're lucky enough to live near the seaside. The best way to sum up their description would be to say that they can grow to nearly 50 centimeters, that's 20 inches for you guys across the pond, and weigh up to 1.8 kilograms or 4 pounds. And they are protected by the armor-like scales that cover almost their entire body. They have disproportionately large eyes, and they can be found in colors ranging from brown to green with red fruity yellow spots to help break up their image amongst their the surroundings of their habitat. Now, the armor that I just mentioned, it starts at the head, hence why helmeted Gurnard has become more popular as a moniker for the species, but it doesn't actually end there. So you've got the helmet separate, and then there's bony plates that basically make up that helmet, are accompanied by scales that kind of run along the body that give the fish multiple serrated edges to protect itself with. The wings are nearly transparent with a bright blue colour to its tips that are actually phosphorescent, which is really cool to see. And I mentioned that I think to the layperson that these might resemble a heavily modified goby-like fish. But Gareth, do you know what the flying gurnards are actually related to?
Oh, let's see. Like based on their looks, I would. Oh, fish is such a gigantic group of animals.
Yes.
I'm gonna go with. Is it things like the perches and the snappers and things like that?
Perches and snappers.
No, I could be vastly wrong on that one.
No, you're a little bit out. So the Dactylopteridae are a family within the superfamily Centriscoideae. Does that mean anything to you?
Hang on, let me have a look at how you've written it.
Centriscoideae.
No, but now I see the rest of it. I can see where you're going.
So the superfamily to which seahorses, sea dragons, and pipefish belong.
That makes more sense when you look at their face, I suppose.
Yeah, but within this superfamily, the closest relatives of the flying gurnards or the helmeted gurnards are actually the trumpet fishes and the cornet fishes, or otherwise known as the flute mouths. But that's kind of moving backwards. If we move forwards in the family, we can see that Dactylopteridae, the flying gurnards, are split into two genera. So you've got the Indo-Pacific Dactylotina, consisting of 6 species, and the Atlantic Dactylopterus, which contains only 1 species, and it's to this latter genus, the singular species of this genus, Dactylopterus volitans belongs, which is our flying gurnard.
Can I say that I've caught one from the Indo-Pacific ones?
Have you really?
Yes, years ago in Australia, whilst sea fishing, which is something that I used to do an awful lot more there. And to be honest, the stuff that you pull out of the ocean there can be truly bizarre.
Yeah.
We caught a Gurnard once.
Wow.
And there's a few fish that have gone down in my like mind as those were some odd things to have caught. We caught one of those once.
Mm-hmm.
We also caught a ghost shark once, the homocephaly, the rat-tailed fishes, as they're also known. Member of the elasmobranchs. They are an odd-looking thing, and when we pulled this thing up, we're like, "The heck is this?"
I think that's a species that I might have earmarked for next year's Halloween.
Yeah, they are a truly odd-looking thing, and they've even got their genitals on their head. Yes, which is another thing that makes them just utterly bizarre compared to most other fish. And the third one was a thing called a nilgai. I think a nanagai, and I lost a $20 bet to my dad.
Right.
We spent the entire night out on this jetty, like basically fishing, and it had been the worst night. The wind was, like really strong. The rain was starting to come in. We'd caught absolutely nothing. Normally on this bit, we'd catch garfish, we'd catch Tommy Ruff, all these like fish that you normally, not a single bite that evening. And we put a crab net down, thinking, well, we might get some crabs or something. And it just, throughout the evening, we'd sort of had a look, nothing. And then I went, I bet you $20 we're going to catch nothing by the end of the night. And like an hour later, we went, fine, let's pack it all up. We'd caught nothing on the rods. And as we're pulling up the crab net, the smallest fish that big had wedged itself into the crab net. And I just felt like throwing myself off the jetty, like, oh, for God's sake. So there's this little red fish with massive eyes.
Yeah.
Like properly odd nighttime adapted fish. I think it's called a nanagai or something like that. But they're a little fish about that big. And I think they probably get a little bit bigger than that. But yeah, I lost $20 because of that fish. So yeah, those are 3 fish that have stuck in my mind from fishing in Australia.
One of which in particular for a bad reason then.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of them for interesting reasons. Yeah, I mean, all of them were utterly bizarre but brilliant. But one of them was the Gurnard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, unlike its kin living it up in the Indo-Pacific, like that one that you found, Dactylopterus volitans lives in the Atlantic and can be found on both sides of the ocean, as far south as Angola and Argentina, and as far north as Britain and Massachusetts. Obviously, I'm not geologically confused. I'm simultaneously talking about where cupboard dwellers on, as they say, both sides of the pond may come across this species. And yes, this range does include the Mediterranean Sea on our side of the Atlantic. Saying this, though, the Gurnard has a clear preference for warmer tropical waters. Anyway, in this range, much of the Gurnard's time is spent on the forage. They are predators who will skim the sea floor up to 100 meters, so bottom dwelling, but still a relatively shallow sea species. Yeah. Sensing the movements and locations of their prey using the same ray or finger-like structures on their fins that we mentioned before. They'll even dig in the sea floor with those rays whilst looking for bivalves and crustaceans. They'll also eat small species of fish when they can get them, but they themselves are actually prey too, which might not come as such a surprise, being 50 centimeters long at their largest. And they have a couple of nifty little tricks to avoid becoming someone else's lunch. The swim bladder has 2 lobes, which are within reach of an interestingly shaped drumstick-like muscle, which, when contracted and relaxed, can beat against the lobes of the swim bladder, creating a form of percussion. It's worth noting that the swim bladder also allows them to grunt as communication.
Somewhat similar to the piranhas, then, I'm guessing.
Yes. And this is an ability for which they are actually named, because Gurnard, as I say, is French and it means grunt. So probably not a very nice name anyway, even if it did sound nice. But this sound, teamed with the excited spread of the wing-like pectoral fins, which flash their bright colours, is often enough to keep would-be diners off of their fillets. And it's good thing this works too. The downside to having such an amazing fin display is that it doesn't really help you get away quickly. And when running, or in their case, swimming away, is the only option left, the rays of the fins must retreat, folding back against the fish's flanks as the tail does all the work to get away.
Yeah.
And what would they be looking to get away from? Well, actually, mostly seabirds, but there are some fish that will try their luck. The thing about the flying Gurnard is they're not just predator and prey. They're simultaneously also part of a symbiotic relationship with many predatory fish that would actually quite happily have a go at them. So that kind of keeps them safe. But as the Gurnards kind of hunt along the seafloor, they actually upset the seafloor. They upset the sediments and the sand. This basically is rooting out all the small creatures and zooplanktons that these other predators would prefer to take as an easy meal. And that is how the flying Gurnard avoids becoming lunch itself.
Makes a deal with everyone else.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you don't feed on me and I will feed you. Yeah, that is, in a relatively short nutshell, the flying Gurnard.
They're a really cool fish.
They are a cool fish. It's a shame there wasn't so much to look up about them. It's more helpful when doing a creature feature on something that there is more information. Oftentimes, species we talk about, we either know or we know enough about their relatives to be able to
fill in the
know
gaps, I
what we're
suppose.
filling gaps, know what we're looking for, know extra places to find info. But with Blind Gurnard, I literally picked it because I thought it looked cool and it seemed to have an interest in life biology, which it does do. But
But sometimes I think you end up finding out something just as much as anyone who would be watching this would also learn.
Hopefully, because I learned all of this from doing this. So yeah, I won't lie. I learned all of this from doing this researching for this creature feature. So hopefully, while short, it would have been useful to you.
I'd like to point out as well, actually, that all of those fish that I mentioned, we did actually put them back. Mostly, well, because as far as we were aware, we didn't know what on earth to do with the Gurnard. Certainly didn't know what to do with the ghost shark when it came to preparing it, and the little Nana guy or whatever it was. I was quite happy to have thrown that back in, just basically for losing the bet. But also, it would have been so small you wouldn't have been able to get anything off it. So yeah, which I think is, in a way, actually one of the best ways to use fishing as sort of almost a diagnostic tool for what's there. I don't have it in me to do fishing anymore. There's a part of it that I can't really do anymore. You know, it's the thought of hooking an animal out of the sea to just look at it to throw it back. Ethically, I don't know. I can't do it. Although saying that, I'd quite happily catch a fish and eat it.
Yeah.
If I was catching things to eat them, then that's fine. Yeah.
A few of my friends, admittedly, I'll be honest. Admittedly, I've wanted to give it a go. And
it's fun.
But a few of my friends do spearfishing.
Now I find that really interesting.
Well, what I like about it is that they can be very, and my friends are generally, whilst not all my friends are zookeepers or conservationists, they are very environmentally minded.
Yeah.
And so they've come to know the fish that you get locally, and they've come to know which ones are doing well and which ones aren't doing so well, and they're very selective. And I find when you're doing it with a rod.
What's a guess?
By the way, I say this: the only two things I've caught doing sea fishing,
a cold,
a cold, and a dogfish, dog shark. So obviously, he went back. Cold came with me. So yeah, but I do find that when you're rod fishing, you're fishing blind. You don't know what you're going to catch. That poor dog shark now has a lip piercing that he didn't want. Obviously, he doesn't have any metal in it.
No.
But I mean, he's got a hole that he didn't want. And
thankfully, sharks are quite good at recovering.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I think you're right. When it comes to spearfishing,
you can do it much more ethically, much more easily. I think
it's almost, in a way, I term that in the same way I don't have an issue with people deer stalking. If it's one person alone stalking a deer to shoot at a distance, this has gone very off track now. But it's you and that deer. There's no. I mean, you have the
sport. You're doing it for food.
You have the advantage. You have a gun, so you can do that from a greater distance, but you still have to be able to track that animal over a distance of however long, or wait for it, or disguise your smell enough that you're able to get close enough to take that shot. And the same with spearfishing. You've got to know the environment. You've got to know where the fish hang out. You've got to then be able to get close enough to be able to make that shot, and you may not make the shot or at all. It's a bit more of an even playing field in some ways, as what would be considered, I suppose, blood sports go. I mean, it's not exactly a sport.
No,
it's more hunting.
I would hesitate to call any of it sport. The spearfishing is not sport. It's you're selecting food, and when you compare that to the alternative potentially being buying from a supermarket, I would say that the spearfisher has the ethical high ground there.
Interestingly enough, that is actually a good place to go. And if you've never seen a Gurnard, go to your local fishmonger and have a look. They genuinely do have them a lot of the time on fish counters.
I've never noticed them, but I will actually go and have a look now.
Yeah. because they do catch them. Presumably they taste okay because you can buy them. But yeah, that's if you want an interesting thing to take little kids to see fish, to get an idea of what they're actually eating, and try and get the idea into their head that these are animals that we are eating.
Yeah.
You're not generally going to come across a butcher's where there's a whole pig sat there.
No,
It's going to be in bits, or a whole chicken sat there. You might come across some traditional butchers that have got a rabbit hanging in the window or something. But I think a fishmonger's or like the fish counter in a supermarket, you're going to be able to see those animals there in front of you to be able to buy.
yeah,
It's a really good way of kind of seeing what is there, especially if it's a local fish market or something. You can see what's being brought out.
The supermarkets around here don't have them anymore. Have you
No,
noticed that?
a lot of them have got rid of them. Yeah, which is kind of sad because I think it means that people just aren't buying a whole fish.
Well, yes, and also I feel it disconnects people. We are already, particularly in the Western world,
Very disconnected.
very
from food.
disconnected from
Yeah.
food, and that just is another. Except for it's not just another step, really. It's another huge step in
Yeah,
disconnecting us from what we actually do.
yeah. No, I think
I
that's
do
quite
wonder
true.
if that's a self-preservation thing on their part, or if it's just if it had other reasons, or it was just accidental. But
I think it's commercializing of things, makes it easier to sell stuff. But yeah, well, that was interesting. We went on a bit of a tangent there at the end.
Yeah.
But should we head into our emails?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Bing! You've got mail. Ooh, it's an email.
Okay, well, we're into this week's emails. We're going to start things off with last week's question, which was, what animal do you think best symbolizes your country? It would appear that most of the people who put this down, I would say, are living in the UK, which is a bit of a shame. We would have preferred some more international ones, but there is one or two dotted amongst this. So we'll start things off with Jan Ashbridge, maybe hedgehog. I think they're quite an emblematic creature of England, or perhaps a hare. Love seeing them in the fields around us. Yeah.
Hare. It's good. Well, hedgehog's a good one too. But yeah, hare. I like hare. Drew Owens, our very own Drew Owens, he's put a comment saying, "Can't get more English than this creature."
I'm not quite sure who this person is, but they look like they need help.
It's like Mr. Potato Head if he was livid, absolutely raging.
I think it is the definition of gammon. In strictest, I can't even see his ears. It's a very odd looking person. Spencer Seams has put, Ben Franklin wanted the turkey, and he was right, and I agree with him on that one. Bald eagles are neat, but turkeys are cooler. I agree wholeheartedly with you there on that one.
Yeah, my mind's still out on the fence with that one, but I didn't know of that because of your feature. Stephen Eddy has answered with vole.
Yeah, no, vole. I mean, they're pretty cool.
Very nice little birds. Birds, sorry, little mammals.
Slightly concerned.
Oh,
your brother, Kelsey Watts, has put fox, badger, stag. One of these legends couldn't choose, or a fox, badger, stag.
The fox, yeah.
Which would be an odd-looking creature to say the least. Couldn't choose. Saw a stag today down Heddon's Mouth whilst working. It was massive and a perfectly formed beast. Good. To which he's then replied to himself, it was working. I was working, not the stag. I guess the stag was working in its own way, which was staring at me, possibly on its break. It might have been a really busy day for that stag.
Yeah. It's a good one. Scott James Puddicoon has said white-tailed sea eagle.
I mean, he's got a bias. He likes birds of prey. I'm going to say
right,
that.
Okay, yeah.
David Thomas put hedgehog.
But there's
So there's another vote for hedgehog there.
And then rounding things off, Catherine Ames, who's clearly from Scotland, has put wild haggis.
Ah, yes. A rare species, the wild haggis. You know how to catch a haggis, don't you?
I actually don't. No.
I see.
Please enlighten me.
So the haggis is an odd creature in that its legs on its left-hand side or its right-hand side, depends on which mountain it lives on, are shorter than the other.
Yeah.
So the way that you do it is you basically have someone chase them around the mountain, and they'll come back around eventually, and you just wait for them at the other side of the mountain, because they can only go in circles around the mountain. That's how you catch a wild haggis.
Wild haggis, there we go.
Yeah. Well, that was last week's question, and
actually, sorry to interrupt.
yes,
we had a YouTube comment on this very question, and this one comes to us from Rosalie 9961, who answered. Funnily enough, I think if memory serves, Rosalie is the one that answers our questions 2 weeks after we ask them. You've answered on the right one, which is a fantastic news. I'm just playing, but yeah, she says, as I've said before, I'm from North America and I live in the USA. Somewhat similar to what you guys did for the British Isles. I'm going to suggest an animal for both the whole country and the state that I live in.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that being Indiana. For the entire country, I'm going with the American bison. They're a strong and majestic animal that works best in herds, similar to how when the American people work together, they can achieve good things. The American bison's story is also very closely tied to the indigenous people's culture and what has happened to them. Yeah, that's very true. For my specific state of Indiana, I'd go with peregrine falcon.
Nice.
My state is known for racing, and what animal could best suit a state like that? Yes, they have the Indy 500.
Yeah,
I think there's like an Indy 400 and something else here, and a Grand Prix. So I don't know much about racing, but I do know some names. I can say F1. I can pronounce that. I can also pronounce NASCAR. And
unfortunately, the F1, when it goes to America, goes to Las Vegas. It doesn't go to Indianapolis.
No. But yeah, I do know Indianapolis is well known for its
Mario Andretti. There you go. There's one of the famous Indianapolis 500.
Oh yeah.
Drivers.
Don't know who that is. I can tell you that I don't particularly like Indiana's basketball team.
There you go.
So she continues, why the fastest animal on the planet, of course. While yes, it's a widespread species and my state doesn't have any great story with them, I thought to combine the two anyway. I think it's a good choice. I actually like the fact that you linked it, because a lot of the answers didn't really give like a reason why it's quintessentially from this country.
I mean, I'm not as much of a mammal person as you are, but I do like the North American bison. As I think I stated before,
we had this conversation.
I think if you're going to pick an animal that symbolizes North America, a bison is a really good contender for that. They are big, powerful animals. They sort of, I think they do symbolize that sort of teamwork thing of people coming together, which is what you want.
Yeah.
But they're also a large, showy animal, which, let's face it, America is a large, showy place, and in good ways as well.
Yeah.
It's an animal that stands out, and I can completely get that. And I like the peregrine falcon for mixing it with like things like the Indy 500.
Do you know, I've thought Weissant was my favourite of the two until we had that conversation the other day, and I've been thinking more and more about it. And whilst I don't think I do have a favourite between the two species, I do think that when I think of that species, my mind goes to bison.
Yeah, I think they're just a bit more obvious,
and they're linked to the as was pointed out in the comment. The link to the indigenous peoples is really quite fascinating, and also absolutely beyond heartbreaking. What was done to those herds just to punish the indigenous. By the way, the NBA team is the Indiana Pacers. Yeah.
So that was last week's question. This week we are not setting you a question. We're not setting you any homework. For the simple reason, next week is our 200th birthday episode. Now, we did actually put out a shout for this a couple of weeks ago when we actually recorded the episode ahead of time, because we do these things sometimes out of order. But that episode is recorded. However, if you want to send us any birthday wishes to the podcast, which is going to have done 200 episodes by the time that one comes out, but also the fact that we've tied in Megalosaurus, so we're giving the game away a little bit for what's happening next week.
Yeah, but it's a good one to shout about, because, like you say, 200 episodes and an animal that was
200 years old. Yeah. I mean, it's more than 200 years old, but its discovery is 200 years old. But Aaron, have you got any thoughts as to what you'd like to say about 200 episodes before we ponder it more in that episode?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think we're very lucky to be able to keep going with this. You put me on the spot now.
No, that's fine. Any future wishes for what you want us to do next year?
Oh, me? Sorry, I thought you were asking that. Any future wishes?
Places you want us to go?
I think and now that we got Patreon, like a couple more patrons, maybe we can make this will be more feasible now. But I think we could do some zoo visits, to get some filming. I would like us to do the Fossil Festival again.
Yeah.
There's also we contacted them.
A variety of different people to come on as guests next year.
Yeah, some guests, and then there's like a Dino Con.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Yeah. No, we definitely have to do that.
Yeah, I think more. So yeah, that's what I'd like to see us doing in especially now we got like I said, we got a couple more Patreons on with us. But I think it's more. I'd like to see what we can do, what we can kind of become with this in the next year.
Yeah.
And
get out there and be in more places.
Yeah, I'd like I grow it a bit more. I'm not doing very well at answering your questions.
That's all right.
It's just they're quite large questions, and I bet you anything I've thought about the answers to these whilst I've been at work, but now that you ask me, it's a bit
I'll put you on the spot. Well, I'll
anything that you've. I'll tell you what. Is there anything that you've? What's been your favourite thing over the last 200 episodes?
It's gonna have to be the interviews with different people.
Yeah.
Those have been the moments where we've had quite groundbreaking people on to talk about just their favorite fields. The things that they like doing.
Yeah.
And just generally being interesting and amazing at the same time, and think back to any of those interviews, they have been really something to sit there and be part of, even just to listen in on them sometimes is amazing. Yeah, I mean that's my thoughts, and I'd like us to get out there and do more next year, and I think we will. I think we're going to go as far as we can into lots of different things, and the plans are already started. So, like I said, that is kind of the question for you. If you want to answer that, you can do so on our social media. You can send us a message. You can send us an email to the nathistorykupboard@gmail.com, where we will try and get in touch with you as soon as we can, really. That's one way that you can get in contact with us. Another way is via our Patreon, which Aaron is going to tell us all about now.
Yeah, that's right. So every week, as you know, we like to shout out and give a little love back to our lovely Patreon supporters. And these are the people who have been kind enough to help us with a bit of a financial contribution. And those people are, of course, Fogtober, Jen Greenhall, Connie P, Chelsea McKee, Nick to Nick, and Matt Jedi. Guys, your financial contributions have actively helped us over the last, since we started the Patreon, and are helping us make plans for hopefully the next 200 episodes and beyond, maybe. So yeah, we really, really can't thank you enough. But for all of our cupboard dwellers as we approach our 200th episode. Thank you very, 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 very much from the bottom of our hearts. Everything that you guys do, whether you've joined Patreon, and if you think we're worth joining Patreon, please do. Liking, sharing, subscribing, watching, being a bit of a
Cupboard evangelist.
Cupboard evangelist, yeah, for us. Just getting us out there. One thing that I would like to do, not necessarily hold a talk, but like talk to more people, like actually in real time. That would be cool.
Well, like we did at the library that time.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But yeah, whatever you do to support us, however you support us, however you consume our content, awesome stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like Aaron said, however you find us, that is a really big help to being able to get us out there and get us known. So, well, that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. So, big thank you, Aaron.
No, thank you. As I say,
fish.
It is an interesting fish. Do you know what? Now I think about it, I don't think I ever imagined that I'd do quite as many fish as we've done.
No,
I did 2 this year, didn't I? Neon Tetra and the Gurnard.
Yeah,
Neon Tetra is definitely still my favourite fish.
it's not the oddest looking fish, but it is quite a cool fish.
Can I just say as well, like anybody listening, in any way you want, whether it's a private message or email, or whether it's a comment on YouTube or on Facebook, tell us what your favourite thing of that you've seen us do over the 200 episodes are. It'd be interesting to hear, certainly from new people and people that have been with us from the start.
Yeah, well, in fact,
and anywhere in between.
In the very start of next year, I will be doing the thing that I've done a few times now, where we'll put forward what everyone's favourite creature is using.
Oh yeah, the tournament.
Using Drew's artwork. So we'll do our bracketed tournament in the first couple of weeks of the year on our Facebook page, which will be interesting to see who wins this time, who comes out on top as the winner of the creature for 2024. So yeah, that would be an interesting one to see, I think.
Let's go Neon Tetras.
So yeah, that would be one for people to vote on next week. But yeah, a massive thank you to you at home for being here, and we'll see you next time here in the Natural History Cupboard. Bye.
Bye. One does not simply grow wings and instantly fly. Especially if you're a bottom-dwelling fish.
Sounds like an inspirational quote that then drops off the cliff at the end.
Yeah.